All right, welcome to 1134 Story Podcast. I am Steve Cohen. I've got Jason Settle in the studio again. I can hear the hate mail coming on this topic today, so it's going to be a little bit intense. We got to have a little bit of a story, just kind of an interesting aspect. But before we get into that, I want to remind you that you are never too lost to be found. We're talking a little bit before the recording about your introduction into men's ministry and how that was a wonderful
Yeah, I mean,
experience.
So I think in this topic that we're going to talk about regarding, masculinity and femininity, it definitely is a hot topic. And I can say this because I know that you would agree that we're not saying that we've got it all figured out either, but we just want to at least talk about it because it's something that's being talked about.
I think there's too much shame that actually gets into things, and a lot of times even having hard conversations is hard for people. It's one of the reasons why we're actually having these podcasts. It gives permission for people to start thinking about things in a different way.
Right.
So taking their lens off of and going that route. So
and then stepping into yourself, stepping into your true reality, like embracing who you are. That's always going to be God's first and foremost goal. I always kind of like say tongue in cheek that if God had a whiteboard in heaven in his heavenly office and had a to-do list, like the first thing on his to-do list would be to introduce you to yourself. Would be like, hey, Steve, have you met Steve? He's amazing.
Yeah.
So I feel that he desires that.
Yeah.
And we long for things to identify with. And so that longing is a God longing though. Like to long for something to be identified with. It's just that longing is him. Like he's the one that sources that. So
before we get into the story, because I do want you to tell us the story about when you got into men's ministry. God put on my heart, some of you have heard this before, he gave me a vision of a statement that says, I am greater than me. And when you're sitting there talking about, hey, I want to introduce you to, well, when he gave me that, I'm like, yeah, I know, Yahweh, you're greater than me. I get it. Like, I don't need you to tell me that you're bigger, better than I am, right? And he goes, I have these conversations, and I'm sure he's shaking his head at me quite often. He's like, no, Steve, you don't get it. The I am is who I dreamt of. The I am is who I designed and desire you to be. And that is greater than your current self, the me. Right. So that introduction, God is just wanting to do that. Hey, by the way, Jason, here's the I am, the Jason that I dreamt of.
Yes.
Now I'm not disappointed in this whole thing. You're in a process or journey.
Totally.
But I want to show you who I know you to really truly be.
Right. That's so good. It's true. And it's true for those that are watching. Like, God is not disappointed in you, no matter where you are in the journey. He is not upset with you.
It's a process.
God is in a good mood.
Yes.
And so, but with the story, though, the challenge, and we all have these. I think we all come to a crossroads of something like this. It just might happen to be a little bit different with the men's ministry. But so I was a part of a church, and I was the youth guy at that church. And there was a men's event coming up, and I kind of helped them with that too. So I was helping the guy because the guy that was running the event also oversaw youth with me. And so anyway, long story short, there's a game because we do games, in men's ministry. And so the game was 20 questions, and he had all the guys stand up, and there probably were maybe 200 or 300 guys in this auditorium. And I'm the dutiful staff member, so I'm on the front row, right? So I'm up in the front row going, let's play this game. And 20 questions, and he said, I'm going to ask these questions, and if you know the answer to these questions, you're not a man, and sit down. And so already my heart began to sunk. It sunk, y'all. Like it was like, because I know me.
And your heart may have just actually sunk, not for Jason, but for yourself, because maybe some of these things, there's doubt or something that's going to come along, even with this story, right?
Yeah.
I'm already kind of like, again, I'm hearing the hate mail coming in.
Yeah. It's just, but so that my heart sunk, and it's like, I knew that at some point in this game, probably early on, I'm going to sit down because I know things that might not be categorically masculine, which that by itself is a problematic statement, but just the idea that there could be things that people would not deem as masculine,
Yeah.
and I know about those things, and so I'm going to sit down. So out of the gate, first question was, "What do you know what a T-zone is?" And for those of you who don't know, it's this space right here. But I knew that, and I sat down.
So for those of you just listening, it's the space of your eyebrows down to your nose.
Right.
Just in case you couldn't see it.
Yeah. So the issue with that, though, for the duration of the event, or at least that game, all these men are standing up around me, and I've sat down, and I felt so much shame. I felt because I know that I'm not, and I live in Texas, so as a born and raised Texan man, like I don't watch sports, I don't really eat barbecue, I don't hunt. I've never owned cowboy boots. Like, there's just things that, like, I don't do, and I'm not against it. If you do it, just do it because you like to do it.
Not because it makes you a man or not.
Right. But there's just things that I like. I love to shop. I tend to cry more. I love Broadway. Like, there's just things that I love I love to shop. Things that I think, if you're not careful, you could be like, well, that's what girls do. That's not it's what people do. Like, people shop. People go to games. People go to different kinds of restaurants. People like certain kinds of things. And I think, because in my life growing up, and I'm not blaming Texas. Texas is a great state. But growing up with these falsified or reductive gender roles, it put me in a place to struggle with that. Like, that I knew something that, like, maybe most guys didn't know, or maybe they're all a bunch of liars and they did know they shouldn't sit down.
Yeah.
But it did cause a challenge, and I feel that challenge now in society, that there's just, and I don't want to say that I get it, because there's so many levels of it that I don't understand.
Yeah.
But I understand the struggle and the shame of, like, am I really a man?
Yeah.
Or masculine? Or what's wrong with me?
I tend to cry quite a bit. Like, anything triggers, and man, I'm just this bawling little baby. Right. And for a long time, I've had that where, man, so many people are like, men don't cry, or suck it up. You're a man. Right. And things like that. And it's like, wait a second. No, my tear ducts were actually created by my creator.
Yeah.
To be used, not just to wet my eyeballs, but it's this expression of emotional overwhelm.
Right.
And I actually cry when I'm angry. I cry when I'm sad. I'm crying when I'm happy. Like, all of these things, and I'm like, that's one of the ways that I'm made. And I like the word, the very big complex word you say, the reductionist way of doing things. I like that, where if we reduce down masculinity and femininity to behaviors and constructs and ways things, like, my oldest daughter loves to wrestle. She will take out anybody. I struggle with her, right? And man, she is like, her legs are like tree trunks. They, like, she could probably, like, sever me in half sometimes if she wrapped her legs around me and squeezed. Like, the boys in the neighborhood don't mess with her.
Yeah.
But there's a term that goes along with a girl like that, a tom boy. So it's literally applying a masculine association to her, which can create confusion. If you're told you're a boy all the time, or like me with crying, you're a girl, stop being a sissy. All your life, that creates this confused manner, and God is not a God of confusion. He has a desire for us. He created you in a beautiful, unique, and special way. And the way you behave, or the way that you, I mean, there's two ways, right? You're created in a certain way, but there's also a rearing aspect of it.
Sure. Yeah, that's a big deal.
Right.
Yeah. So especially in roles in the family, and so for parents, I mean, it's like, it's real easy to fall into a stereotypical familial role situation where, the mom goes to the kitchen and cleans and cooks while the dad goes to work, and just being able to, like, which, if you do that, that's fine. Again, there's no issue with stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home dads. There's no issue with any of these things. It's just, the enemy doesn't need a whole lot to work with to implant confusion and lies in the hearts of his children. And so just a simple child watching dad and mom behave a certain way, and not being able to align to that could be enough confusion. There's no ill will by mom and dad. They're just living their life. They're not trying to misguide the kid. It's just, I think in a family, it's important to say overtly these days that there is no masculine or feminine role in a family. There's just roles in a family that we can play, and we do these roles based on what makes most sense for the family, not the gender.
Yeah. When I was growing up, I remember we would go on trips. Now, my parents were divorced, and my dad would actually take us on business trips. So one of which was actually go to Panama City, Florida. And we're in the back of, I think it was a rental van or something. I don't know how we actually fit in this thing, but I didn't get to bring any of my toys. So I had a stepsister. So guess what we played with the entire way, the 6 or 8 hour trip? Barbies.
Sure.
Right? I'm sitting there playing with dolls. And here I am, a growing boy. Playing with those dolls didn't actually make me any less of a boy. And the struggle that I had, though, is any of my friends who had seen me playing with those dolls, I would have been raked over the coals. I would have been judged. I would have been, again, that sissy boy that plays with dolls and cries all the time, right? So there's like all of this judgment of humanity. And like I guess one of the things I want to talk about is like where the root of the judgment comes from.
Yeah.
Not just the insecurity of the person that's receiving the judgment, but I mean, just think about it. If you're told something for 20 years, people are judging you, they're belittling you. I mean, I met a young woman, and I hope she actually sees this, at a market one day. We're out selling our apparel and books, and she walks up and goes, "What's all this stuff? Is this Christian stuff?" And I'm like, "Well, we would consider ourselves Christian, and I don't know that clothing can be Christian, but it reflects the heart of a Christian, right?"
Yeah.
And she goes, "Well, I'm a witch." And her boyfriend goes, "And I'm a Wiccan." And I was like, "Well, what made you go that? What made you deal that?" And after a 30-minute conversation, she sat there and goes, "You know, if my church had actually talked like you have talked to me, if my church didn't beat me up and belittle me and abuse me psychologically and emotionally and drag me through the dirt for so many years, I probably wouldn't be a witch today." Yeah. Her identity is actually based on like this protection of who, like she's trying to get away from the abuse, right? So now imagine anybody, this abuse, like I'm wondering where like that comes from. I really hadn't planned on actually even attacking that aspect, but it's like where do we get the right, or where do we struggle with all of a sudden placing that judgment and going, this is how a man behaves.
Right.
This is how a woman behaves. And if you don't do this, you're not.
Right.
That means you're the other. And it's like this, it's like the two-party system. If you don't do this, then you're this.
Right.
When God is actually both.
He's both. He's the perfect feminine and the perfect masculine. And so, and there are some churches that do well to receive people like you did. There are some, of course, that don't. Where the judgment comes from, that's a great question. I'm not sure that I've got like all the answers for that, but I will say that like, you know, it's so important to be curious and not judgmental. And if you're going to be judgmental, then appropriate the right verdict. Because like if we're being judgmental necessarily isn't always a bad thing, in my opinion, if you look at them from the eyes of the innocent, not the guilty.
Wow.
Because when Jesus Christ, who took all that he took on that cross for us, and he was said guilty. Yeah. Like that guilt that he took bought our innocence. And so I can judge you so long as I'm doing it with the right verdict.
Yeah. I mean, you know, so Yeshua or Jesus, he talks about judging, right? He's like, you know, they're talking about the chaff or whatever. I always get it wrong, and my wife corrects me typically. The little speck is what a lot of translations talk about in somebody else's eye when you got a big honking log sticking out of yours, right? A big piece of lumber here. Right. You're worried about something else in somebody else's life. Let's stop all that garbage. Yeah. Let's go to like where Ephesians 4 talks about make room for others. right? To mess up and to be messy. And let's actually all just unite. Now, I'm blending multiple biblical constructs here, but let's unite in this walk of messiness, this sanctification process. You're messy, I'm messy, he's not.
Right.
We can unite and go, that's what I want to look at.
Right.
Or that's what I want to look like. That's what I want to reflect.
Right.
And even in my messy, I'm still in a process of gaining or going towards him. Whereas the judgment comes in and says, you're not reflecting him.
Well, neither are you with that tone. And so like, I think the fight and the battle is always for identity. It's just sometimes in the last, decade or so, that fight has looked different, but the fight is at the baseline, it's identity, right? I mean, whether someone is trying to identify with a job or identify with a gender or identify with a sexual orientation, identify with whatever. Like, I'm not here to judge what they're trying to align to, because I know that I've been in my life and I have fought tooth and nail. And there's some days I'm still challenged with what I'm identifying myself with. Yeah. And it might not be a gender thing for me. That doesn't mean that it's less than or that it's greater than somebody else's battle. But I feel like to level play the playing field, or level set rather the playing field, the cry of the people is identity.
Yeah.
And it might come across in different types of flavors. That's fine. And I don't think it's right for us to, like you said, to judge necessarily the flavor that it comes out, but just to see the heart behind it and to embrace the person.
Yeah.
Right, with empathy. So that's the thing that we miss in these moments is that empathetic reaching out, going, I don't understand fully what you're going through because I'm not you. I'm me. But I understand that you are reaching for identification and that you desire to be a better version of you, a wholer version of you. And so I get that. I can link with that because I have felt that way. I do feel that way. So I think empathy helps us to not look at someone and point, but to come alongside them and be like, I see the same thing you're seeing, maybe differently, but the same thing.
That was a vision God gave me a while ago. I'm in the midst of actually writing a book called Shattering Paradigms. So the paradigm though was talking about empathy, or he showed me an image that the only way that we can actually get to be empathetic is if we're willing to actually take our lenses off. And what he showed me, or the illustration he showed me, is he pointed to, or showed me something that's purple. And he asked me what color it was. This is God. I'm sitting here having a conversation with him. And I'm like, well, it's purple.
Yeah.
And he asked me, is it really purple? Or are you looking at a red surface with blue lenses? Or are you looking at a blue surface with red lenses? Are you looking at a white surface with purple lenses? And I was like, well, that's just basic color theory, right? And he's going, no, this is how everybody keeps on looking at things, is they're not actually coming to me and asking me what I see, the truth of the matter, the reality of the matter. They're just so busy looking through their own paradigms, looking through their own lenses, and they aren't willing to take them off. And where true empathy comes to play is when we're willing. I have contact lenses on, so this might be a little awkward. I would take my lenses and I would lay them on the table and go, can you look through those and can you give me yours?
Yeah.
Because I want to see the world through your lenses. I want to see the world, and that curiosity. One of the things you said was huge, is this aspect of curiosity, where we have to be willing to not render the verdict,
right,
but to come in and go, can you tell me why you think that? Like, what's your experience? Because as an atheist, I was a hate-filled atheistic antichrist. I found my joy in ripping Christians apart at a coffee. I would that's what if they could cry, if I could get them to cry and doubt their faith, I was elated.
Yeah, you won.
That was the person I was. Yeah. And what ended up actually coming, or the person that God put in my path along that journey didn't berate me and tell me all the ridiculousness. He literally sat there and did exactly what I just talked about. And he asked me, well, why do you think that?
Yeah.
Why do you feel that?
Yeah.
And he ended up allowing being a conduit for the love of God
to
change my life. That guy didn't save me.
Right. But he leaned in.
But he leaned in and opened up a conduit for the Holy Spirit to radically change a hate-filled, atheistic antichrist to love the God that he thought he hated. And that's me. That's where I was at. So there's like this aspect of healing that can come in that. I self-identified hate-filled, atheistic antichrist. Found myself at a Marilyn Manson concert just a couple months prior to me coming to Christ. Right? Screaming at the top of my lungs, I hate God. And a mosh pit that was pressing in all of a sudden wasn't around me. So I'm like, that's the intensity of who I was.
Right.
And God loved me so much, took that really messed up person and just brought somebody along to actually usher his love into my life.
Yeah.
I don't think that happens enough right now. We have so many Christians that are, and this isn't every Christian, but we have people that are identifying as Christian that are yelling and screaming and not reflecting the love of God.
Right.
And saying that is what God thinks.
Well, I think the issue too is we put too much finality on our perspective. Like, I don't mean to be super blunt, but even for those watching, how you see things isn't the final verdict. Because even how I see things to this day, the concept of even how I see life, like that needs to be shattered. There's no finality to my perspective. There's finality to his. And so he does a phenomenal job, let's just say perfect job, of seeing humanity.
Yeah.
We do well to see what humanity does. And so if we can look past the activity of humanity and just see a person for who they really are, like that creates a safe place. It doesn't matter what you're identifying with or what process you're in or what I want to see you. Yeah. Like that's for a counseling word, that's attunement.
Yeah.
Where I see you.
Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah.
I'm with you. What you're doing is irrelevant. I'm here with you. I see you. I hear you, and I'm with you. And that, I mean, I'm not trying to bash the church, but any church, organization, business, I mean, can go far if we just attune and lean in to a person, despite what they might be struggling with, because we struggle too with those things. But yeah, there's no finality to our perspective.
We may have to actually talk about this one because it's kind of going on a different tangent here, maybe in a different episode. But I felt like while you were talking about that, God showed me back when Black Lives Matters started, just everybody, like back when I was in high school, we had No Justice, No Peace, right? So there's this entire movement just recently within Black Lives Matters, which is now actually a political like firestorm if you even start saying those things or if you disagree or don't agree with those. But what God actually started showing me was, instead of engaging in the argument of the political aspects, he showed me that your life matters. Like every single person that's screaming at me or saying you don't believe this or you're not supporting this, what God's message for them was your life matters. And when it really comes down to it, he loves every one of his children. Every one of his children's lives matter. That's not belittling one group. It's including all groups. Right? And we'll probably side skirt that for a different time. But the importance of that is in the messiness, in our brokenness, in our hurt, we're screaming, sometimes violently screaming at the top of our lungs, telling people we don't feel seen. We don't feel heard. You're ignoring me.
Right.
And when we just yell back, it only confirms their belief that we don't care. Right.
Right, because you're not safe if you're yelling back, and then they're going to turtle and go back into their shell.
Or yell louder. And it becomes even just this thing where you have two streets or two side streets that end up breaking out into violence.
Right.
Because we're not willing to actually go, tell me how you feel.
Yeah.
Why do you think that? And actually being okay with possibly disagreeing in the end. Not just a conversion conversation, right?
Right.
So, we are probably going to have to sidestep that a little bit more. That's another deep topic, right?
It is.
We'll see kind of what we do with that. But we want to thank you so much for being a part of this. Jason, he's actually here. He's got a counseling, consulting, conferences, coaching,
all the C words.
All the COs. It's called Settled Co, settledco.com.
Right.
If this conversation has encouraged you, if it's challenged you even, we'd love for you to pass this on to your friends and family members that you think could be challenged or encouraged through it. We like to say that you can actually be a seed of hope in your friends and family's inbox, maybe even your enemies, because we're supposed to love our enemies, right? So we want to encourage you to share them. If you haven't already subscribed to our channel, please go ahead and actually do that. And you can also get free resources, also support our ministry through our apparel or books at nowfound.org. Again, nowfound, not newfound, nowfound.org. And I just want to remind you that God loves you. He sees you. He created you. And you are never too lost to be found. God bless. God bless you.